Michigan is one of the best programs in college football history, and despite them being on hard times here in 2024 so far, they are fresh off of a national championship in 2023, and they had really good quarterback play in J.J. McCarthy. But besides McCarthy, I was kind of wondering, what happened to every single Michigan starting quarterback since the year 2000? Well, that's essentially what we're going to do in today's video. We're going to go all the way back to the turn of the century and talk about each and every quarterback who started for the Michigan Wolverines and talk about who they were and what ended up happening to them. Also, excuse me if I ended up missing a player who started a one-off game, as I'm mostly talking about the guys who were real starters who started multiple games. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about what happened to every Michigan starting quarterback since 2000. Okay, so the first guy we're going to talk about is Drew Henson. He was the Wolverines starting quarterback going into the year 2000 and was one of the weirdest stories on the list. He was a dual sport athlete in high school at both football and baseball, but committed to Michigan to play quarterback. He was actually Tom Brady's backup in 1998 and 1999 before taking over as the full-time starter for the 2000 season as a junior. But he had to have surgery on his foot to start the year, meaning he missed the first 3 games of the season, and Navarre took his starting spot. Once he came back though, he took his starting spot and finished the year with 1,800 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 4 picks. But instead of coming back for his senior season, he decided to go back to the MLB, which is where he spent his summers as a minor league player, since he was drafted by the Yankees in the 3rd round of the 1998 MLB draft. By 2001, he was a prominent prospect in their system, but he flamed out of baseball by 2003 and ended up back in the NFL with the Texans as a 6th round pick in the 2003 NFL draft, where they would trade him to the Cowboys the next year. He spent 5 seasons in the NFL as a backup with the Cowboys, Vikings, and Lions before retiring in 2009 as the Lions took Matthew Stafford. In total in the NFL, he had 98 yards, 1 touchdown, and 9 interceptions. Navarre was a highly sought-after recruit in the class of 1999, who sat behind Tom Brady his true freshman year and was the backup to Drew Henson in 2000 before Henson got hurt. He started the full season his sophomore year in 2001 and was the starter for the Wolverines until he graduated in 2003. In 4 years with Michigan, John started 41 games and won 31 of them. He threw for 9,000 yards, 70 touchdowns, and 30 interceptions. And despite being one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, John fell to the Cardinals in the 7th round of the 2004 draft, and he only played a few games with the Cardinals as a backup before he left in 2007 and would sign with the Colts, but he did not make their active roster, and then was out of football by 2008. John would finish his pro career with 342 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 5 picks in just 2 games in 1 start. After that, we have to talk about Henne. He was a 5-star recruit in the class of 2004 and the 3rd best recruit in the country when he committed to Michigan. He was the starter immediately for the Wolverines, finishing the 2004 season with 2,700 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 12 picks, and leading Michigan to a 9-3 record. In 2005, he was the starter again, throwing for 2,500 yards, 23 scores, and 8 interceptions, but Michigan went 7-5. They then went 11-2 in 2006 and lost the Rose Bowl to USC, with Chad throwing for 2,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. In 2007, he got hurt in week 2 and sat out a few games before returning to the starting job, where he threw for 1,900 yards and 17 scores. He was considered one of the top quarterback prospects in the 2008 NFL draft and was selected by the Miami Dolphins in the 2nd round. He didn't play in either 2008 or 9, but made his first career start in week 8 of the 2010 season. He'd started a few more times in 2011, but he wasn't re-signed by the Dolphins, and he ended up in Jacksonville in 2012, where he was the backup to Blaine Gabbert. He'd be a backup in Jacksonville until 2018, when he signed with the Kansas City Chiefs to back up Patrick Mahomes. He'd actually come in clutch in one of their playoff games as Mahomes went down with an injury, and he has 2 Super Bowl rings that he got as a backup, and he retired in 2023, finishing his pro career with 1,300 yards, 60 touchdowns, and 63 picks over 15 years. Kind of a weird stat line. Up next, we have Stephen Threet. He was a 3-star recruit in the class of 2007, and he originally committed to Georgia Tech, but after a staff shakeup, he ended up transferring to Michigan before the 2007 season started. He still had to sit out a year though, and ended up starting 8 games in 2008, and he was a better fit for head coach Lloyd Carr's offense. He traded starting duties with Nick Sheridan in 2008, but Michigan would finish 3-9, and Coach Carr would retire after the season. He ended the year with 1,100 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 7 picks, and after the Wolverines brought in head coach Rich Rodriguez, he decided to transfer to Arizona State. At ASU, he battled it out with Brock Osweiler for the starting job and actually started in their season opener, but he was inconsistent that year and ended up retiring in 2011 because of concussions. He finished his college career with 3,600 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 23 interceptions. Ryan Mallet was one of Michigan's greatest recruiting wins in the 2000s. He was a 5-star recruit in the class of 2007 and a top 5 overall recruit in that class. He played as a true freshman backup to Henne and actually started a few games for him. His first start came against Notre Dame, and the Wolverines won 38-0. He ended up finishing 2007 as the starting quarterback for the Wolverines, but decided to transfer from Michigan as they brought in Rich Rodriguez. He finished his time as a Wolverine with 892 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 picks. From there, he ended up at Arkansas, where he was their starter in both 2008 and 2009, after sitting out 2008. At Arkansas, he actually finished 7th in the Heisman voting in 2010, and finished his college career with over 8,000 yards, 69 touchdowns, and 24 picks. He was eventually drafted by the New England Patriots in the 3rd round of the 2011 NFL Draft, where he was the backup to Tom Brady. Once he lost the backup job to Jimmy Garoppolo in 2014, he was traded to the Houston Texans, where he made his first starts in the league. But he missed a team flight in 2015, and the Texans cut him for it. So he ended up in Baltimore for 2015 instead. He played well in relief of Joe Flacco, but was out of the NFL by 2018. He finished his pro career with 1,800 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 10 picks, and he then became a high school football coach, and then he tragically passed away by drowning in 2023, and it's just an awful story, and honestly Ryan Mallet deserves a video at some point. Our next guy is Nick Sheridan. He's one of the more interesting stories on the list. He ended up growing up in Saline, Michigan, and walked onto the Michigan program as an unranked recruit in 2006. He stayed with the program when they hired Rich Rodriguez to be their new coach, and in 2008 he became the starter for 4 games, throwing for 612 yards with 2 touchdowns and 5 picks. He only played in 3 games the following year, throwing for 88 yards with no touchdowns and an interception. After college, he quickly went into coaching and became one of the better offensive minds in the country. He started coaching at his old high school before joining Western Kentucky's staff in 2011. He then followed Willie Taggart to USF in 2013 as the Bulls quarterback coach, and then after a few years at Tennessee as an assistant coach, he ended up at Indiana in 2017 as their quarterbacks coach alongside Kalen DeBoer, and when DeBoer left for Washington, he would join him as the tight ends coach, and then once DeBoer left for Bama in 2024, he would follow him to become their offensive coordinator. Sheridan, to be honest, has kind of rode the coattails of DeBoer, but he's had a successful college career. Okay, so the next guy on the list is Tate Forcier. He was one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the country when he committed to Michigan as a 4-star recruit in the class of 2009. He won the starting job before even taking a snap in Ann Arbor and led Michigan to a 5-7 record as a true freshman. The next year in 2010, though, he was passed up on the depth chart by both Denard Robinson and Devin Gardner. He ended up committing to San Jose State in 2011 and would have been eligible to play there in 2012, but he struggled with academics his entire life and flunked out of college before he got to play. He tried to make a football comeback with the Hamilton Tiger Cats of the CFL, but that didn't work out either. In total, he was out of football by 2013 and finished with 2,600 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions in just 20 games. The next guy is Denard Robinson. He was a dual sport track star coming out of high school, and he was part of the class of 2009. He played as a backup to Forcier in 2009, mostly running the football. He then started in Michigan's season opener in 2010 and instantly broke Michigan's quarterback rushing records with 383 yards of total offense, 200 of which were on the ground. He later had 500 yards of offense against Notre Dame and was a legitimate Heisman contender. He stayed after Rich Rodriguez was fired and Brady Hoke was brought in, and then he started at quarterback again in 2011 and 12. He would finish his college career with 6,200 yards, 49 touchdowns, and 39 picks, as well as 4,400 rushing yards and 42 scores on the ground. He then was drafted by Jacksonville in the 5th round of the 2014 NFL Draft, and he was a running back in that. He only ended up throwing 2 passes in the NFL, and was instantly passed up by TJ Yeldon on the depth chart the next year. He flamed out of the league entirely by 2017, and spent 2019 with the Atlanta Legends in the AAF, and would finish his professional career with 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns, and recently was hired back to Michigan, but then got in trouble, and was fired. After Denard Robinson was Devin Gardner. He was a great dual-threat quarterback coming out of Inkster, Michigan, and signed with the Wolverines in their class of 2010 to run the spread option under Rich Rodriguez. After playing a little bit as a true freshman, Devin was the backup to Denard Robinson in 2011, as he was moved to receiver for a little bit in 2012 before Denard got hurt, and then moved back to being the starting quarterback. He was then the official starter in 2013 after Denard was drafted, but Michigan went 5-7 and fired Brady Hoke. Devin finished his career with over 6,000 passing yards, 44 touchdowns and 32 picks, as well as 900 yards and 24 scores on the ground. He then signed with the Patriots as an undrafted free agent in 2015, but then was cut from them and the Steelers in the preseason, and he would actually end up in Japan and won the X-League's Rookie of the Year award. He spent 2018 in the CFL before retiring from football, and now he calls games for Fox. After Devin Gardner was Jake Rudock. He came to Michigan by way of St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Florida, just like John O'Corn, but he originally committed to Iowa in the class of 2011. While at Iowa, he sat for his first 2 years in 2011 and 12 before he started a few times during his redshirt sophomore season and then started all but one game in 2014. After his junior year at Iowa, he grad transferred to Michigan and instantly became their starter for the 2015 season, where he had one of the best passing seasons in Michigan history, ranking number 2 in single-season passing yards and number 1 in single-season passing completion percentage. He finished his college career with nearly 8,000 yards, 54 touchdowns, and 27 picks. He was then drafted by the Lions in the 6th round of the 2016 draft, where he was their third-string quarterback, but he wasn't re-signed in 2019 and spent that season with the Dolphins, where he stayed until he retired from football in 2021. He would then finish his NFL career with a total of 24 yards and an interception. After Rudock was Wilton Speight. He battled a ton of injuries in high school, but had a huge athletic pedigree in his family, and even though he was an unranked recruit, he was still highly recruited. He ended up signing with Michigan in their class of 2014 under Brady Hoke, and after a redshirt season, he became a main backup to Jake Rudock, coming in when Jake was hurt, and then he became the starter for the 2016 season. He played through a broken collarbone and was the incoming starter for 2017, but he got hurt early in the year and lost his spot, so he transferred to UCLA for 2018. Speight would then get hurt again, and then DTR would take over after that, and he finished his college career with 4,700 yards, 28 touchdowns, and just 16 picks in 30 games of action. John O'Corn was a 3-star recruit at St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Florida as well, and he committed to play football at Houston in the class of 2013. After sitting on the bench to start 2013, he was actually made the starter after Houston starter got a concussion and retired from football. He started the first 5 games of the 2014 season with the Cougars before he was benched in favor of Greg Ward Jr. He then transferred to Michigan in 2015 to be a backup, and after Speight got hurt in 2016, he stepped in to be the starter. Speight won the starting job in 2017, but John was unable to get back into the starting role once Wilton got hurt again. He consistently threw interceptions as a starter though, and would finish his college career with over 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, and 24 picks. Up next, we have a guy who is barely talked about, and that is Brandon Peters. Coming out of Avon, Indiana, Peters was a big 4-star recruit and would decide to sign with Michigan in the class of 2017. Peters would barely end up playing as he threw for 672 yards and 4 touchdowns and just appeared in one game in 2018 before entering the transfer portal. From there, he'd sign with Lovie Smith in Illinois and would actually start 3 straight years with the Illini and in total had over 4,000 yards passing there. He eventually tried to go off to the NFL but was not able to make it work. Shea Patterson was the next man up, and he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school before going to Ole Miss. While he was with the Rebels, he was a backup his freshman year, but then Chad Kelly got hurt and he'd have to start. He carried that momentum into being a starter in 2017, but since Ole Miss had that huge recruiting scandal, he was able to transfer right away to his childhood favorite team, Michigan. He started every game for the Wolverines during his junior and senior year, but he could not lead them to the playoffs. He ended up finishing his college career with over 8,800 yards, 68 touchdowns, and 27 picks. After flaming out as an undrafted free agent with the Chiefs, he spent some time in the CFL before joining the Michigan Panthers of the USFL. He didn't last long though before he was cut, and right now he's playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders of the Canadian Football League. Another interesting name who had a short-lived career at Michigan was Joe Milton III. After becoming a 4-star recruit because of his insane arm, Milton would actually end up starting in 2020 for the Michigan Wolverines, but was not very good. Eventually he'd get benched in favor of Kade McCarthy, and in total he had 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns with 4 picks. From there, he transferred to Tennessee to be with Josh Heupel, and after being a backup for 2 seasons, would take over in his 6th year of college football, throwing for 2,800 yards with 20 touchdowns, and in total he had over 5,300 yards in his college career. He'd then get drafted in the 6th round by the New England Patriots, and Joe Milton will probably be a career backup because of how good his arm is. The guy who replaced him was Kade McCarthy. He was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2019, and after originally committing to Notre Dame, he would flip to Michigan. After spot starting in 2020, he became Michigan's opening day starter for the 2021 season, where he started all 14 games. He helped lead the Wolverines to a win over Iowa in the Big Ten Championship game, and a berth in the college football playoff where they lost to Georgia. After starting 1 game in 2022, he lost his spot to J.J. McCarthy and transferred to Iowa for 2023. He'd play in 5 games for the Hawkeyes before hurting his knee, and he came back this year and hasn't been very good. Okay, so the last guy that we need to talk about is J.J. McCarthy. Coming out of IMG Academy by way of his hometown of LaGrange Park, Illinois, McCarthy was always a talented quarterback as he was a 5-star recruit and committed to his childhood favorite team, Michigan. How did he do at Michigan? Well, after being a backup in 2021, he found the field as a starter in 2022 and beat out Kade McCarthy in Week 2, leading Michigan to an undefeated season and a loss to TCU in the playoff. He then came back the next year in 2023 and helped lead Michigan to an undefeated 15-0 season and a national championship win over Washington. He finished his college career with 6,000 passing yards, 49 touchdowns, and 11 picks, and was drafted by the Vikings in the first round. Unfortunately, he would suffer a torn meniscus in training camp and will have to sit out the entirety of 2024. We have no idea how he's going to do in the future, but he was drafted to be a franchise guy, and he has lots of potential. But what do you guys think? If you're a Michigan fan, is there a starting quarterback I forgot? Who is the worst and who is the best on the list? And what other team, school, or position group should I do next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.